Right, so I'm here, I'm back, I'm outside the courthouse. As you can see, the courthouse behind me. All right, I'm not letting the camera overheat today. I'm in the shade, I'm under some trees, I'm on the other side of the street, okay? No one can mess with me over here, right? This is the plan. But I've got my notebook, I've got all the notes, I've got everything that went down in court today. And what I'm gonna try and do is do like a bunch of kind of smaller little breakdown videos on specific aspects of this, so you guys can kind of get the information that you're looking for. But it was a pretty crazy day in court today with Dirk. This is the last hearing before his full-blown trial begins. It's scheduled to go ahead. There was no delays, there was nothing like that going on, and it looks like jury selection is going to be done by the end of the week. That is what is planned, okay? Now, it got off to a little bit of a weird start. Now, for the first time, now this is a little bit weird. I feel like this maybe was just an oversight, but usually they let the lawyers in, right? I see Brian Steele, I see Drew Findlay, I said hello to Brian Steele, you know, say he's still got all that aura, right? But he went into the courtroom, and usually they then say, like, the journalists and the public can kind of come in afterwards. They didn't do that this time, so, like, all of the reporters were kind of waiting outside. Even some of the people from Dirk's team were waiting outside. Then I like peeked through the window and I was like, yo, it started, like the judge is in his chair. So we just rushed in there. We were like, yo, let's get in there. But it seemed a little bit like, you know, I don't think that was something that was intentional, but it just seemed a little bit like, yo, like they're not waiting for anybody. Like this judge, not playing around, he's not waiting for anybody. He wants to get this done and he wants to get it done within a couple of weeks. That's what he wants to do and that's what's going to be happening. So I don't think there's going to be any delays for nothing going forward, okay? And I know it's very busy, I'm out here in the middle of the street, all right, there's a lot going on, but this is the best I can do right now, okay? I want to do all of this right here on location, give you the information as quickly as possible, rather than go back to my desk and tell you all this same stuff. So, okay, there were some very interesting rulings that were made in the courtroom. There was discussion of more songs, there was discussion of which songs were going to be used, which incriminating lyrics from the songs were going to be used, photos. It was very interesting. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you a little bit more backstory on some of the incriminating songs that are going to be used against Dirk, some of the alleged autopsy photos of Lil Pab that are being not guaranteed to be used, but the prosecution want these gruesome autopsy pictures to be shown. And you know, I saw autopsy photos in the David trial and well, in the David hearings, and it was really horrible stuff. So I can understand why they would, especially the judge, would prefer for the jury to not see that stuff. It definitely does kind of make you, you know, very, very like upset and like, you know, very, very like emotionally affected by what you're seeing. So there was some really interesting stuff that kind of came up, certain music videos that are going to be used. So I'm going to break it all down to you in this single video. And again, I'm being attacked by the wind once again, all right? I don't think I can catch a break in this this courthouse. But anyway, let's get into it. Let me get you the right page and all of that good stuff, okay? Look at the state of this. Look at this, it's just getting blown around in the wind. All right, let me get to the right page. So the first thing that was kind of ruled on, that they were talking about, let me get in focus, is basically like this whole motion about, you know, Lindsay's inclusion in like group chats that suggested that he was a co-conspirator. There was this whole thing of like, did he find the conspiracy? Did he take the conspiracy as he found it? Did he join it as it was found? And basically they kind of went back and forth about this. The judge pretty much said, look, he's going to grant some of it in part, he's going to deny some of it in part. Obviously more paperwork and written breakdowns of exactly what will be allowed will come eventually. It basically said, yeah, some will be allowed, some won't be allowed, and they said that the government made a mistake of basically trying to see this whole conspiracy to kill Lil Pab and to kill Quando Rondo as the same as an overall gang membership or gang conspiracy. They're saying that more specifically, you know, there's a lot more things going on than just the murder of Lil Pab, and this isn't a gang trial. This isn't a trial of OTF, the Black Disciples, the GDs, all that stuff. It's a trial about the stalking of Quando Rondo, the murder of Lil Pab that happened in LA, which really, and I also admit, even though that I do think that, you know, there is plenty of evidence that Lil Durk is a gang member, allegedly a leader of OTF, a faction of the Black Disciples, that's not what this trial is about. The next trial is going to be about that, and the judge did confirm that's going ahead. It's not like the feds are just going to give up on Dirk's other murder because it got severed. The judge said he was pushing forward with that, but I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But what was also interesting is that they basically went on to kind of say, the judge says, look, he doesn't want to allow everything and then begin striking evidence. He wants to like get to the bottom of what's allowed at this point so that they don't have to go back and forth too much when the trial actually starts. Now, after this, okay, they basically said that Dee had made a motion for bail, basically just said it was denied for the very reasons that the government wanted it denied. It was denied. Dee ain't getting no bail, right? Not happening. And he basically made it very clear. He said, look, the mandatory minimum sentence for this case is so serious that any normal person would want to flee. He basically said, if you or I were accused of these crimes and you were facing these sorts of years, life in jail, anyone would flee. A reasonable person would get the hell out of there. So ain't no chance of a bail. They said even a normal person would be getting out of there, okay? So basically, as time went on, all right, he would kind of go back and forth. The judge would basically say, look, I want a date for the second trial. The Vicar murder, you know, the Stefan Mack murder that got severed from the Lil Pab murder case, that's still going ahead. That's not just being fallen by the wayside. That is actually going to be taken seriously. And the judge said, I don't want to leave that on the table. I don't want to leave that hanging in the air. I want a date. He said, you two lawyers on both sides, you need to go back and forth and get to the bottom of when that's going to take place and let me know when that. I want to put a date on the calendar for Dirk's next trial. So he didn't even finish this murder trial, and the judge is already pushing, saying, I need a date for that next murder trial. So I thought that was pretty bad, to be honest with you. Now, there was basically going back and forth disputing various exhibits that are going to be brought at the trial. And obviously there's a lot of evidence, there's songs, music videos, text messages, all kind of stuff. And Dirk's lawyers were basically given their opportunity to fight back against loads of specific pieces of evidence. So the judge says, look, this segment of the hearing is going to basically be to figure out the exhibits that are being disputed. The judge basically said, I've looked at all of the exhibits. I felt like I understand what's what. He said, I'm going to bring up all the ones that I think I need to hear further arguments on, and I'm going to let you guys go back and forth on both sides on what you think should happen. So let me just hydrate myself for a second. So the first thing that came up was obviously very serious. It was Exhibit 41, which was the autopsy photos of Lil Pab. Now, this is obviously just, you know, it was a horrific crime. It was a horrific murder. You might have already seen the footage that was going around on social media that I believe was posted on TMZ of the victim, Lil Pab Savia Robinson, laying on the ground after being shot. Quando Rondo is at the scene screaming no. It's horrible stuff. But obviously there's even worse stuff that the medical examiner has. And the judge says, look, he said this last time as well, he said, I don't usually handle murder cases, but I do handle LAPD civil rights cases where the cops have killed people, okay? Basically explained what that was all about. And he said, look, I usually don't really like showing stuff with people's faces. I don't want to show the body. I don't want to show, you know, these gruesome autopsy pictures that are going to affect the jury in a negative way. So again, as a lot of people were hating on me saying, oh, you got things wrong last time. No, the judge, he's not ruling on everything, but he's given his opinion. And what usually happens, just like I said, like when they said that the phone evidence, the judge said that he wanted to allow the phone evidence to be in. That's what I told you guys, and everyone was saying, it's cap, it's cap. What happened 2 days later? The judge signed the paperwork. The phone evidence is going to be included. So he didn't rule on the autopsy, but it sounded like the way that the judge was talking was that he wasn't really feeling the autopsy and all of gratuitous pictures of the autopsy being used. They basically said, you know, he wants to show, if he has to show stuff, he'd prefer to show it where there's no faces on display, nothing too gruesome. They basically said that the autopsy is showing, you know, it usually shows how the person died, where bullets entered and left the body, but there's no dispute that Lil Pab died by gunfire. They're saying, look, we don't need to sit here and try and prove that Pab was shot to death. We know that. We don't need the autopsy. We don't need to traumatize these jurors to prove that Lil Pab was shot to death. So they basically said, all right, government, how will you argue based on what I've just said why this should be included? Why would you want to go against me? And the government said, look, we got 2 exhibits from the autopsy, as well as another exhibit that's separate. And the judge says, I felt like one of the exhibits was a duplicate of other evidence. They said that 12 and 13 were non-graphic, so he might allow those, but he really did feel passionate about excluding exhibit 10, which he said was particularly graphic. Now, the government basically went on to say, look, we've got to prove our case. It's not contested that Lil Pab died by gunfire, so they agreed with the judge saying, look, we don't need to show the autopsy to prove that he was shot to death. That's obvious. We could do that with a TMZ video. But what they went on to say that is this is part of building the narrative. And in the process, they accidentally admitted something that maybe went to possibly showing that some of their evidence was a little bit weak, because they said, we're going to show the clip of the shooting. Now, we've already seen still images of the shooting from the original indictment, but they said, we're going to show the clip. But they said the clip is black and white, and it's only 2 seconds long. All it shows is the guys hopping out with blicks, shooting them, the car drives off, and that's it. That's all that they had to show of the actual murder footage. So really, it sounds like the actual footage of the murder on CCTV, yeah, they got it, but it's not that good, and that's why they want to use the autopsy pictures to show. They basically said, without pictures of Lil Pab's wounds, the jury are going to be guessing what happened after this grainy 2-second clip went down. They said there's no question that gunshots killed Pab. They said that they're fine with limiting it to 1 autopsy photo, but they want to show them, and they said, look, we want to show, if we had to choose between 1, we'll show photo 3, not photo 2. It shows the exit wound, it shows the complete picture of the fatal wound, the wound that killed him, and if we could go with that, we would. Now then, Brian Brian Steele kind of took his opposition to this. And again, when Brian pops out, when Drew pops out, you know that it's going to be something interesting because they are the hotshot lawyers on the team and they argue some of the best points. So Brian Steele popped out. He said, look, we have the same position as the judge. He said, look, we're not going to challenge the medical examiner. We're not going to try and say that Pab died of something else. They're not going to try the type of nonsense that we heard in the David situation. They basically said, look, there's photos from one of the first responders' body cams. First responders are witnesses in the case. You know, it was very, very clear that, you know, what was going down, what this actually happened after this shooting took place. They said the autopsy pictures are not needed. Brian Steele said it will influence the jury, is too much, okay? So that was taken under consideration. It sounds like the judge is going to minimize the autopsy photos. Maybe he'll allow one, but it didn't sound like he was going to allow the prosecution to throw all of them out there. Yes, he's not put his signature on it yet. Who knows, all right? But I'm telling you, because I was sat in the courtroom, the types of thing that the judge seemed to infer were going to go down. So after that, they talked about Exhibit 145, which was photos of guns that were seized from participating witness 3 in his iCloud account, okay? Basically, in his iCloud account, there was pictures of a bunch of guns, okay? They didn't say whether this was the case, but I feel like perhaps these might be some of the guns that were actually used in the incident, or even photographs of them, you know, procuring the guns, showing what guns they were going to use. I don't know exactly, but like, they basically said, you know, the judge basically just said these were allowed. Even Brian Steele said, look, we're withdrawing opposition. We're not even going to fight this one. We haven't really got a case to make. And the judge said, yeah, these photos are going to be allowed. Photos of guns were allowed. Autopsy photos still under consideration. Now, after that, there was a very interesting one where they said it was Exhibit 148. They said this was a screenshot of King Von wearing OTF and O-block chains together. Now, the defense was saying, why is this necessary? We don't need this. And again, they kept going after this theory of like, this isn't a gang case. This isn't about the GDs versus BDs. This is about Quando Rondo and a specific personal beef and a stalking charge. It wasn't about the GDs and the BDs. So basically the government said, look, this is central to the case, who King Von was, what his connection to OTF and O-Block was, and the defendants were seeking revenge for King Von as a real gang leader. And a text message that was brought up numerous times, they mentioned it here, but then they actually showed it on a screen later on. Basically, after King Von died, apparently Lil Durk sent a message saying that Von was a real gangster that got taken out, or it was something along the lines of, you know, Von went out like a real gangster, like he went out fighting, that kind of thing, right? Durk admitting that Von was a real gangster, that's not really good for his case, right? Because even if you want to say it's, the government are basically saying, of course we need to make this about gangs. Durk said Von was a real gangster, he was going to slide. They even said later on that apparently Durk said in a message that if the shoe was on the other foot and he was dead, Von would have been sliding for Durk. Facts. And I'm not disagreeing with that. Now, even Brian Steele said, look, we don't have any opposition to this, we're going to allow it. The judge allowed it, that was confirmed. Again, I don't think the signature is on the paper, but he said that that would be allowed, all right? I'm telling you what was said in the courtroom. So then we got to Exhibit 152. That was a picture of Durk with Didi and others holding cash. And there's been this whole debate about, oh, we shouldn't be allowed to show cash, stop showing cash, stop showing money. But like, it sounds like they're going to allow money to be shown, and I'll give you the information. So Brian Steele basically said, look, picture 152 is very similar to 159. It's basically the same picture. The picture shows the guys with a bunch of money. It's cumulative. There's too much testimony about money. He's saying Durk's a superstar. He's got access to money. He's a millionaire. Pictures of him with money and his friends with money don't mean nothing. And he said if we have to choose, we'd pick picture 159 over 152. And 152 was the image that was actually at issue here. So after that, the judge says, well, if I allow any of them, it's reminding everyone it's in his hands. Then Didi's lawyer interjected. He said, we still object under Rule 404B. They said that the court already ruled that wads of cash are inherently prejudicial. On another basis, they said if they allow either of these, it's improper. It casts aspersions on everybody involved that their money was from criminality. And again, I feel like Durk's and the defense lawyers are trying to pull a very shifty move here because they're not trying to show the money that they were all making a bunch of drug dealer money. Yes, Durk is a millionaire. He was doing songs for Drake. That's been established. They're not showing the money to show that Durk was getting money out the streets. They're showing the cash to show that Durk was taking clean money from his music career and handing it out to the hitman. But they don't really want to admit that, okay? After that, we then heard, basically the prosecution said, look, the LAPD's this was really interesting. They said the LAPD's very first lead on Lil Pab's murder was from Didi's Instagram. Apparently a Chicago Police Department detective had sent it over to the LAPD. They sent this picture, Exhibit 152, from Didi's Instagram of him holding a bunch of money. They said that participating witness number 1, who we now know is OTF Jam, is in the picture, and they asked for a search warrant on OTF Jam. They said that this is all from a music video set called for the song Risky. They They said that Jam would claim that the money in that shoot was split up against the eventual murderers, and basically the judge says, well, look, if witnesses are going to testify on these pictures, then they should both be allowed. And this came up a lot. They kept saying, oh no, this shouldn't be allowed, this is prejudicial, but the judge said, look, if a participating witness is going to say something about a picture, the picture kind of has to be allowed, because it backs up what they're saying. It is like, it's only right that if they've got a snitch, right, that's what they don't call them a snitch, but that's what everyone's calling them in the streets. If they've got a snitch, they're basically, you know, they're allowed to show pictures that back up what they say. If you guys are going to get up there and defend Dirk and say, oh, all these witnesses, they're liars, they're all taking plea agreements, they're all not to be trusted, well, it's only right that they're allowed to pull up pictures and say, well, here's some proof. So basically, Dee Dee's lawyer said, well, look, the video was shot in June 2022, just a couple of months before the alleged bounty or the alleged murder, and it's improper to show it. And the judge slapped it down. He said, I disagree. He said, this image shows a relationship between all the co-conspirators in this murder. He said, if you want to cross-examine Jam, you can, but you can't exclude this image. And then Dee Dee's lawyer said, but there's a picture of them together not holding cash. He basically was just making it all about the cash. The cash is irrelevant, all right? Well, not that the cash is irrelevant, but their arguments about the cash, saying, oh, you can't, he was making legit money, that's not what this is about, okay? And the judge says, look, if he's going to testify about the cash, if Jam's going to talk about the cash, they're allowed to show images of it. It's allowed, all right? He said, I appreciate the argument, but it cuts the other way. They might expect Dirk to have other certain things in video, like bling, cash, or cars. You know, if Dirk had a Bentley in his video, yeah, the Bentley itself isn't prejudicial, but if Jam testifies, yeah, we got given a Bentley for the murder we did, then it's going to make sense. It's going to be allowed, all right? That was an example that was given. But anyway, they moved on then to another music video. They said that Pissed Me Off was allowed, but they had more questions. The judge basically said, I've got some questions about these supposed gang signs that are thrown up in the video screenshot. And this confused me a little bit, I'm not going to lie to you. On this, they basically said, look, we're going to have, the prosecution said, we're going to have a participating witness basically say that the OTF guys, they created their own hand signal that was actually specifically a tribute to King Von. Now, I'll be honest, I'm a die-hard Chiracologist. I don't know of any hand signal that was actually a specific signal that was like reference to King Von. I don't know if it's a V or I don't know what signal that was. I ain't seen that one, so I'm gonna have to do my homework on that one. But regardless, the judge said it would be allowed. After that, they were looking at picture 163. They said this shows the relationship between Asa Houston and D-Thang, Lil Durk's older brother. And the prosecution says we'll redact. There's some text. It's basically a social media pic of them together, but we'll redact the text overlay on it that's not relevant. And the judge says, well, look, D-Thang isn't at this trial, so why is this relevant? And the prosecution made a good argument, and the judge accepted it. The prosecution said, well, the relationship between D-Thang is what made Lil Durk trust some of these guys. And he said specifically that Asa Houston grew up as a gangster disciple, which is the ops of Durk's, but the relationship with Durk's big brother D-Thang is what basically solidified the relationship and made Durk want to trust Asa Houston as being part of this conspiracy, right? So that was really interesting, honestly. I felt like that was kind of fascinating. I feel like I'm getting little droplets on me, but it's definitely not raining. What the hell? I don't know if something's falling from the sky. But anyway, so in addition to that, all right, next up that was interesting, okay, you feeling that too? No. I felt, maybe I'm bugging. I thought there was a little rain droplet that I felt then. Maybe it's just, I don't know. So, after that, they were talking about the Block is Hot music video. Now, this was interesting, okay, because apparently they showed a screenshot from the video where Dee Dee was featured. And it said the music video basically shows relationship between all the co-conspirators. They said that these videos weren't allowed, but screenshots were allowed. So Dirk collaborated with Dee Dee after the murder. This is the song that I've been breaking down for you guys in other videos. The Block is Hot, the Block is Hot. It's the one that's got hella self-incrimination in it. It's on the OTF group album that came out a few months after the murder. And Dee Dee ain't the best rapper in the world. He ain't really have no business getting on no OTF album, right? He's on that, you know what I'm saying? It seems like he's on that album because of his reputation as a guy rather than a rapper, if you get what I'm saying, okay? And they said that in this, Dee Dee is throwing up more gang signs. They said that participating witness number one, OTF Jam, will testify that he was present, and this was absolutely crazy. I'm not gonna lie to you, this shit blew my mind. They said that in the video, they're gonna show a screenshot where Jam is there wearing an orange sweater, and he's gonna describe a moment behind the scenes on this video shoot where apparently Dirk and other members confronted Jam in a bathroom. They took him in the bathroom. Now that's weird on its own. They took him into the bathroom and they said, yo, you're moving too hot in the streets, you're gonna get us jammed up, you gotta be more careful about committing murders murders, you're going to get the feds on us. Now that's crazy because it seems to indicate that there were other murders going on Jan was involved in. It might be other murders that he's admitted to the feds to get out of this situation. So they're saying that he was just moving absolutely reckless in the streets. Dirk and them were taking him into a bathroom stall, I don't know about stall, but into a bathroom to basically warn him and say, you moving too hot, you're getting the feds on us. Turns out he was the feds. That shit's crazy, I'm not going to lie to you. That blew my mind. So after that, Dee Dee's lawyer made a couple of arguments and basically said, look, there's an issue here. The government is trying to bring the Vicar case, the gang case, the Stefan Mack case, through a conspiracy to commit murder for hire. These are two separate cases, basically saying that OTF Jan was confronted about unrelated criminality. They're saying that he wasn't confronted about the Lil Pab murder, that he was being confronted about other additional murders that were making the block too hot. Bear in mind, they're at a music video shoot for a song called Block is Hot, and they're taking dude into the bathroom and saying, yo, please stop committing murders, you're making the block hot. Like, right, it's beggars belief. So after that, all right, Dee Dee's lawyer would keep making arguments. He would basically say, look, the government wants its own way, basically saying that OTF is its own gang, but maybe it's a BD gang, maybe Tay-Town's involved. They want to include gang signs when this isn't a gang case. This is supposed to be a murder for hire against Quando Rondo and a bunch of guys from Savannah that had a music industry beef with King Von. They basically said, look, either it tells the story of part of this crime or it doesn't. Now the judge says, look, I often agree with the defendant's arguments about things that were done post-murder that aren't a part of the conspiracy, but, all right, he basically said, look, right here, in my opinion, I think there's been an assertion from OTF Jam, PW1, that makes the conspiracy more likely. I'll leave it up to the jury, but it wasn't that long after the murder. It was only a few months after the murder. I'm going to allow it. It was admitted. Now, what I think I'm going to do is... let me keep going and then I'm going to wrap it up soon. I've got bikers on the scene. Let me keep going. I'm going to read a couple more pages and I'm going to separate this into another video, but I think this one's interesting. So they then ruled on items 183 and 184. And... okay, you know what? I'm going to put this in a separate video because we're going to move more onto like talking specifically about Von, what Von's involvement was, what people were thinking about Von. So I'm going to move on to a separate video. That's kind of everything, you know, about the autopsy and, you know, some of the other stuff. But I'm going to separate this so that it's easier for you guys to digest. So that's it for now. I appreciate you watching this one. I'll be back with another one very soon. I'm literally just going to record back to back and get all of these done and then get all these out to you as soon as possible. But anyway, thank you for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one. I'm about to go back to back. I'll see you there.